right. Good. Today I want to speak about, in the next couple of classes after this, I want to speak about what Richard Dawkins does to the proofs for the existence of God of St. Thomas Aquinas. And then maybe if I have time, go on to St. Anselm, what he does to St. Anselm's ontological argument. And I mean it when I say what he does too, because he drains the life out of them, and then he attacks them. All right? He gets rid of the substance, and then he attacks what is left. He seems either he cannot reason in a serious philosophical way, or he intentionally reduces the arguments to absurd propositions, okay? So one or the other, it's hard to tell. I think the first. And since I think it is the first, that he cannot reason in a serious philosophical way, I'm going to, when you look at what he says, all right, he makes fun of the idea of essence, okay, which seems critical for a Darwinist to deal with. He makes fun of the idea of substance, which is also critical for any attempt to grapple with these issues. Because that is the case, I want to look back, all right, for a moment and focus on where I think he's coming from philosophically. Where's he coming from? Where does he start? Okay, whether he knows it or not, this is clearly where he starts. And I think he's of course English, there's no doubt that he starts from John Locke, all right, and the British empiricists, and the principles and the ideas that they hold as a given. Okay, so I think we should look at them for a moment, and then when we read the criticisms of St. Thomas's proofs, we'll see, okay, yeah, you're not even getting close to what St. Thomas is saying. Why? And the realities that St. Thomas is dealing with. Why? Because you're stuck in what I call the Locke box, okay? And some brother raised his hand and said, "Oh, doctor, you spelled Locke wrong," okay? No, that's what I mean, the John Locke box, all right? And this is what I want to tell you, and I don't just tell you for the sake of this lecture. Don't get put in the Locke box, okay? Dawkins wants to fight you on his own territory, okay? And he wants to put you in this little Locke box of concepts that you can't get out of, or you don't feel you have the right to get out of, okay? The proofs for the existence of God, not even the proofs for the existence of God, but the very types of knowledge and types of experience that allow us to see and know the presence of God and the reality of God, those transcend the concepts and the argumentation that Dawkins is willing to allow us. All right, he wants to trap us in the Locke box, all right, and the philosophy of John Locke, and we're going to bump around in there and look ridiculous because we don't smash through the Locke box, smash out of it into the real world of knowledge and reality that God gives us, okay, and which shows his existence. What is the Locke box, okay? Just some basic things about John Locke. John Locke, these are his dates. So when Dawkins is looking for a epistemology, all right, a view of knowledge. He doesn't intentionally say this, but that's where he is. He's going back pretty far. He's going back 300 years, okay? And he goes back really to the ideas of a John Locke, who has been called the father of British empiricism and liberalism. Okay? And I want to speak particularly now about his empiricism, because it has a nice sounding name. Okay? And it starts off, it pretends to be a type of realism, but it is not, all right? It pretends to be a type of realism, but it certainly is not, certainly not. What was Locke dealing with, okay, when he constructed, what was Locke dealing with? No, let me just tell you this first, make this distinction, okay? I just want you to write it down so you have it, and you always remember it, okay? Always remember it, because this is the fundamental distinction that distinguishes a realist view of knowledge and what we can call an idealist form of knowledge. Okay, always remember this distinction. It's critical. You see it from John Locke and Descartes all the way down. Okay? But now, of course, they act like the realists are insane, okay, in academia. But this distinction is something we have to focus on. Okay, realism says that ideas, it's a question of ideas, okay? And I want you to focus on that word itself, ideas, all right? Notice what we're not saying. Notice we're not making the distinction between concepts and images anymore, okay? Write that down, all right? No longer, so these men starting 1600 something, they're not making the distinction between, as St. Thomas did, as Aristotle did, between abstract concepts which grasp the universal, okay, like humanness, and images, all right, like a pink elephant or, a praying mantis. There was just, one on the bed in just a few minutes ago, and I gave it some natural selection, and okay, so we can imagine that. Okay, I can still imagine it. Okay, it's an image, right? It's an image. And then you have concepts. I say praying mantis or, mosquito or whatever. Those are essences. Those are concepts that I have. But they're different, right? They're different. Well, the key to the modern view of knowledge is that they collapse those two realities into the word ideas, the concept of ideas. Ideas. The term ideas. Okay, ideas. We just have ideas, things going through our minds. Okay? Now, realism says that ideas are that by which we know things. Okay? Ideas are that by which we know things. This is really the common sense view of ideas, that they help us they allow us, our minds, to get to the realities that are out there. Okay? So our ideas allow us, they're like little instruments that we use to get to the real world, to understand the real world. Whether the physical aspects of the real world with images or the essences present in the real world, like humanness, okay, like love, justice, animality. All right? So ideas are that by which we know things. The realists say what knowledge is about is knowing things. That's the end result, okay? Now, starting with René Descartes, we'll put him here. He's a Frenchman, and we'll say circa 1650, because that's when he died, okay? Very holy death, apparently a very well-prepared death and pious death. He didn't fully know where his ideas were going, all right, what they would be used for. René Descartes makes the fatal turn, all right? He makes the fatal turn. Notice he's before Locke, or the generation before Locke. He makes the fatal turn. What's that fatal turn? No longer are ideas that by which we know things. Okay? No longer are they instruments. No longer are they that by which we know things. Rather, ideas are that which we know. See? See the difference? See the difference here? Instead of our knowledge grasping things through ideas, our knowledge grasps ideas. That's what we know, ideas. Okay? That's the end result. We touch ideas and grasp hold of them. So you can figure it out already. What's going to be the problem of modern philosophy? Suddenly the problem of modern philosophy. From then on, from Descartes on. If you just grasp ideas, and that's as far as you really go, what's going to be the problem? Subjectivism. Because what? How do we avoid subjectivism? Some embrace it. Some want to avoid it. But why are we stuck in the subject? Go ahead.
We lose touch with the things around us. We can no longer know them.
We can no longer know them. Okay? Well, the question is this, and it becomes such a huge problem. Do my ideas conform to reality in itself? Okay? I don't know. It's scary. They must. Really? Maybe not. So the whole problem of that 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, and then in the 1900s, the whole problem was all that time, well, how do my ideas conform to reality? Or do they? In the 1900s, they said, who cares? We got our academic chairs. Who cares if they conform to reality? I'll just keep talking to poor captive students. Yeah, okay. Yeah, modern 20th century philosophy just focuses on ideas, forgets about whether they correspond to reality or not. So, John Locke, Descartes, and here you see, look at this move that Descartes does. Now, ideas are that by which, ideas are that which we know. Descartes' a scientist. Descartes' a mathematician, okay? He wants to understand the world. Remember, he's one of the founders of classical physics, okay? Well, okay, Descartes, the world's out there. The world that you want to measure and understand is out there. But you just, through your method, just said that ideas are the end of that's what we know. The object of thought are ideas. How are you going to get from your ideas to some certain knowledge of reality? Okay? How are you going to get, Descartes, from your ideas to a certain knowledge of reality? Certain. Okay? Because contrary to what most people think, who have even heard of Descartes, he wasn't a relativist, and he didn't want subjectivism in any way. Okay? He wanted absolute certainty about everything, God and the world and the human soul and everything. Okay, absolute certainty. And his science, he said, I'm going to lay out the scientific laws and principles, and they're absolutely certain. I mean, he's a Frenchman, so I don't know if he could help it. But he wanted certainty to such an extent, all right, and he knew that he was laying out the building blocks of the Empire State Building of knowledge, okay? And they really didn't have building blocks for that, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so he's laying out the science. This is certain. This idea is certain. This law is certain, okay? The only question is, well, how are you going to get certainty? How are you certain that your ideas conform to reality? How do you get certainty? Because you just said all you can know is your own ideas. Well, there's various ways, and it's not our purpose here to go through the whole thing. But the big thing was that he employed the idea of God. All right, he employs the idea of God. Okay, so, one thing here, Dawkins basically he's mocking the idea of God, treating it as something childish. Well, all these founders of modern science took it absolutely seriously. And not only understood its seriousness and the reality of it, but they took it into themselves as affecting their own life. So Descartes, in order to go from his mind and his ideas to objective reality, says, okay, I'm going to use the idea of God. The idea of God. Notice here the idea of God. He is going to say that this idea conforms to reality. Okay? However, he's focusing on not God, but the idea of God. The idea of God's going to save him. Okay? The idea of God's going to save him. And how does he do it? He said, well, God, I have an idea of God. Okay? And my idea is that God is infinitely perfect, all-knowing, omnipotent. Okay? That's the idea of God I have. And I also have all this experience of nature. Okay? So I have this idea of God as being all-knowing and all good. And I also have this experience of nature. Like now, I'm touching the table, right? It seems like it works. It's walking on this floor, beautiful floor. And, okay, now I am almost certain that that there's a nature out here and I'm experiencing it, right? Well, how do I get that certainty? Well, I got to use the idea of God, okay? The only way Descartes says he can get with certainty to the outside world is by employing the idea of God. And he says, well, this God who is omnipotent and all-knowing and all good cannot be a deceiver. Okay, can't be a deceiver. He can't lie. And he created me. Another thing Descartes says he knows for certain. God created me. And he gave me this awareness of things. He gave me this awareness of a world that seems to be outside of myself, that seems to be objective. Okay? So, that's why I believe that there's that's why I can know that there's an external world that's extended, that's material, okay? That is as it seems to be, only because, though, I know God is not a deceiver. God wouldn't deceive me. Okay? And he's going to say, everyone has this idea of God. Okay? Everyone has this idea of God. And therefore, they can trust, therefore, that the world they experience is the real world. Well, John Locke, he starts off wanting to be a realist. No. He wants to save, in a way, common sense. He wants to save, in a way, common sense, okay? He wants to save, in a way, our experience of the world. But he makes one fatal flaw. And that's going to affect philosophy all down the line. And it affects the attitude and thinking of Dawkins. Okay, no doubt. He's going to stick with this. He's going to stick with this. Okay? This is what he's going to stick with. Ideas are that which we know. He's going to stick with idealism, in a way. He's going to be stuck with ideas, and that's it. Because he says that's all we can know are those ideas. So the question becomes again, well, do these ideas point to something outside? It's a big problem for Locke. It's a big problem for Locke. One thing he's going to do, and we'd say, well, okay, that's in a way common sense. He's going to say that there's no innate idea of God in every human mind, okay? John Locke is going to say, no, Descartes, you're wrong. There's no innate, inborn idea of God in every human mind. Okay? That doesn't exist. We can come to know God, but it's not the idea of him is not innate. And that's nothing wrong with that. Nothing in itself wrong at all. In fact, the Jesuits who knew Descartes, who were friends with Descartes, who were in China, and trying to missionize the Chinese, wrote back to Descartes, because they were reading his work, and they wrote back to Descartes, said, wait a minute, the Chinese have no innate idea of God like you describe. They just don't. All right? So, I mean, the Jesuits were saying the same thing. And Descartes tried to refute that. And so, there's no innate idea of God. Locke is going to say, and this is why he's an empiricist, all the mind has is what comes to us from sensation. Okay? So this is John Locke. And this is very much just like Dawkins. All we have is what comes to us from sensation. Okay, well, okay, it sort of sounds like Aristotle, right? Okay, sort of. Sounds like Aristotle, actually. Everything that we, the mind is a tabula rasa, it's empty slate. And sense experience writes on that slate, right? But is that what Locke meant? Because when I have sense experience, I say, oh, there's brother, there's the camera, there's the Dawkins book, okay? There's me. Okay, that's what I seem to experience. That's not what Locke says you experience, though. All right, I mean, me too, but that's not how Locke portrays knowledge. Locke says that all the mind has to work with regard to sensation, are perceptions. All the mind has to work with are perceptions. Okay? All the mind has to work with are perceptions. And he means something obvious. He means, what we, like perceptions. And of course, he reduces perceptions to material perceptions. Notice where he's going, okay? I think it's intentional. He reduces perceptions to material perceptions. Okay? Because actually, Locke appears to have been a materialist. Okay? Locke was a materialist. In fact, he's the first philosopher that spoke of matter thinking. Okay? He is the first philosopher. Look at the date. Pretty late. He's the first philosopher that spoke of matter thinking. Before his time, it was understood that the mind had to be spiritual or non-material in order to really think and understand. So he's going to be the first one to put out the idea that matter can think. Okay, matter in itself can think. So what is this? What do we think of? We think of perceptions. Perceptions. That's what he means by ideas, perceptions. What perceptions? What are perceptions? Like, he makes a distinction between simple and complex perceptions. Okay? Give me a simple perception. Simple, like brown. Like little brown. Patch of brown, okay? Like smooth. Like sour. Okay? That's a simple perception, little bits of information. And, okay, what about a complex perception? Like bumpy, green, sour. Any ideas? Bumpy, green, sour. pickle, right? A pickle, okay? A pickle. That's a complex perception. My perception that I call pickle, okay? That's a complex one. What's the simple perceptions? Sour, green, bumpy, okay? So he says what we do, we take in only simple perceptions, green, bumpy, smooth, sour, odoriferous, okay, odoriferousness, and the mind puts those perceptions together in complex perceptions. Like, okay, there's the cow, there's Bessie, okay? That's it. That's human knowledge. Then we say, well, what is the big problem here? If this is what you're reducing knowledge to, what's the big problem?
It's just the external shell.
Yeah! It seems like you're giving us the external shell. It seems like you're giving us the external shell. And that's a great word, shell. What you're not giving us is the substance, the essential content, which is what the thing is. So, Locke is going to give us the external shell. Because he's going to say, well, that's all you perceive. Actually, is that's all you perceive, and your mind puts it together, and you got a complex perception. The external shell. Okay? So but what can't you see? No. What can't you perceive? You cannot perceive. Well, he says it. You cannot perceive in this way, you cannot. Okay? Again, this is the lockbox. Okay? This is the lockbox. What can't you perceive in this way? You can't perceive substance. Substance. Well, it seems like a big thing. You can't perceive essence. And even, you can't perceive existence. Right? Where? I don't see it. Oh, no, that's not it. So you can't perceive substance, can't perceive essence, can't perceive form, unless you mean shape, which is not what we mean. You can't perceive existence. Okay? So guess what? All those concepts are rendered sort of vacuous. And that's I'm getting a little mad at this point, okay? Because Richard Dawkins says about St. Thomas's proofs for the existence of God, he says about them, they are vacuous. He said, Alan, I hate to say this because, he's so famous and everything, but he calls them vacuous. Okay? So, but what you're operating on, your view of your thinking is what is vacuous. Okay? Because you vacuumed out from the inner shell, from the outer shell of reality, essence, substance, and existence, and being. Okay? Locke and followed by Dawkins, vacuums out from that outer shell substance, existence, being. And then he just left with externals. I'm going to talk about this next time, but he speaks, the third proof of St. Thomas is about contingency, like contingent beings. Dawkins speaks of him as speaking about physical beings. You see the difference between contingent beings and just physical beings? And I don't think he realized he's doing it. I don't think he's like plotting as some genius. I think he just in Locke's box himself. So, but Locke knows, all right, he's not as far along as Dawkins, Darwin hasn't come yet. So, but Locke realizes that we seem to know that there's substance in the world, okay? Like we run into substances, not just external perceptions. So what's he going to do? Can you visualize this image? Disgusts me to the max, but just try to follow me here. A pin cushion, right? A circular pin cushion, and colored pinheads that surround the pin cushion. Does it disgust you? It just disgusts me. And you can't see the pin cushion. All you can see is the pinheads. That's sort of well, anyways, no, I won't call them that. We just see all the colored pinheads, okay? Do we actually see the pin cushion? No. But the pinheads are staying up, so I guess there's a pin cushion, right? That's as far with regard to understanding substance that Locke says we can go, okay? He says, well, all those perceptions, they're hanging on something. There must be something underneath. We can't perceive it. Therefore, we can't know it, okay? We can't perceive the substance underneath. Therefore, we can't know it. That's a big thing, saying that the human mind can't know the substance of things. That's a big thing, okay? But we presuppose that there's a substance there, upholding all the perceptions, okay? Upholding all the accidents. But it's just we presuppose that there's a substance there. We don't know. We can't know. All we can know is the surface. Pretty soon, someone like Dawkins is going to say, what's this idea of substance? Like, so dumb. He puts in quotation marks. Forget it. Let's cancel our lunch date, okay? Because there's really not much to talk about. But that's where he leaves us. The hollowed out shell of accidents, perceptions, and physicality. There's no attempt, there's no ability, or he doesn't want to allow us to penetrate to cause, to substance, to essence, to being. And if you can't talk about being, how can you talk about a creator? Well, how can you also refute the idea of creator, right? If you don't even talk about being. Okay,